Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. I'm here at the Precision Public Health Asia 2025 conference, and my guest today was just a speaker at the conference, Dr. Michel Poulain, who is a Professor Emeritus at University of UCLouvain in Belgium. He's also a senior researcher at the Estonian Institute for Population Studies at Tallinn University. And 25 years ago, he first initiated the demographic concept of blue zones, which are regions with exceptional longevity. And he has spent decades studying, exploring with what these communities have in common, what they reveal about how we live and how we age. So I'm delighted to have him on the show. Michel, thank you so much for being here with me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So the term blue zones has entered the public health vernacular recently, and I think many people are aware, but they don't quite understand what it truly means and how the concept was born even. Maybe you could begin there.
Yes, I will try to be short because we don't have 3 hours in front of us. But it's clear that when I started to study longevity. It was not my first job because I started as astrophysicist and then I did some work on migration, but then when I was 43, I entered in the field of longevity study. And the main objective was to be sure that the centenarians are really 100 years old. Okay. This is the age validation of centenarian. And there was a meeting of those researchers in Montpellier in France in 1999. Okay. Yeah, 1999. It's the last century. Okay.
Yes.
And at that meeting, a Sardinian team arrived and say, "Oh, in the mountain of Sardinia, we have so many centenarians." Okay. Then I still remember the coffee break, and we were discussing between demographer. Oh, it's a remote area. There is no document. The men are lying. They are not centenarian. So we decide somebody has to go there. And this somebody, there was not a lot of candidates. I was the only one, and I went there, and I arrived. I remember I landed in Alghero on the 20th January 2000. And I visited a celebration of centenarian, and I started to validate. What does it mean, validate the age of centenarian? Is to go in municipality to look all the birth record, and in the margin of the birth record you have the date of death. And so by difference you can see if these people are centenarian or not. So we identify 40 centenarian and validate it. So it was really against the expectation of my colleagues. It was true. It was true. But it may be the end of the story. I may come back and say, yes, the centenarian in Sardinia are real centenarian. But what has happened at that moment is that I say to my colleagues, look, on the map, when you have centenarian in one village, you have also in the neighboring village, and again in the neighboring and so on. And at that moment, I took my blue pen and I shaped on the map all the village where they were centenarian. And from that time, it is named Blue Zone. So I found an old email from April 2000 where I discussed with my colleagues about Blue Zone. Right. So the Blue Zone story is already 25 years ago.
So I'm so curious to know what makes blue zones exceptional. But before that, can we talk about age verification? Because it must be really difficult to verify age. And I think that's the basis of any study of longevity. Yeah, exactly. The first step is age verification. So when you are verifying the ages of centenarians, how hard is it to prove or to disprove? Especially in countries where maybe the record keeping is not great, or they have very limited public documents.
Exactly. So to validate the age, you need to find document, which means you need to have a birth register 1 century ago, because it should be at the birth of the centenarian, and to have information in the margin. And all should be consistent. For example, I visited the oldest person on earth. That was a man, 114, in Menorca, Spain, Emma Morano, 118 in Italy, and Maria Branyas 117 in Olot, in Catalonia. And for these centenarian, I met them, and we need more than the date of birth in a register. We need to have information on the whole life, to be sure that there is no error. Just to take an example, the first man who reached 110, a Dutch named Geert Adriaan Boomgaard, we found 60 information alongside his life. 60 information. We know that he was a shepherd, that he went there, that he was born Mary, and so on. So we have a lot of information that confirm that we are well facing a person who reached 110. Age validation is really crucial, and I have an example. In Georgia, Caucasus, I was there to check about the centenarian, and I was, it was with the company of the president of the retired person. So, and he bring us everywhere to find people that were supposed to age 120, 130. And as soon as we arrived in the village and in the place, the person disappeared, no more. And so the last day, I was with my host, and he said, oh, my mother is 110. I jump on the roof because I want to see this mother, and her name is Marta. So I visited Marta, and she has a Russian passport, and on the Russian passport she was born in 1891. And at that moment we were in 2002, which means by difference she was 110 years old. And I start question and so on, okay, but I have only her passport, but it's okay. And unfortunately she died 6 weeks later. That's often the situation with centenarian. When you meet them, be sure that you answer your question, because they will not survive so long. But what is important is that 2 months later, I received some document from a professor from Tbilisi, and these are the family books that were written in 38, 40, 42, up to 48. And in the oldest one, she was born not in 1981, but in 1901. Not in 1891, but in 1901. And I looked the next book that is newly written, and it became 1900. And then a bit later, 1895, and finally 1891. So this is really a wonderful woman. She succeeds in 10 years to be 20 years older.
Okay.
So this is, but it's the proof, really the proof with document that people may exaggerate their age, for which reason we are not yet well informed, but maybe it was linked to Stalin, because Stalin was very interested in the longevity in the mountain of Caucasus. So maybe that they push
the age.
Add that. But so, age validation is number one, and in a lot of countries where it is not possible, please stop. And I take the example of Cuba. I'm sure that there is longevity in Cuba. So I went there 3 times, and when the one month I was invited in the municipality, the birth record was open. I started to check page by page, and the police arrived and threw me away. No, it's not always possible.
Okay.
Either it is not a law, or it is not
public records. Not accessible.
Or there are no data at all.
So Sardinia was the first?
Sardinia was the first.
And then Costa Rica, was it?
After that,
or Japan?
After
Okinawa.
that, 1 year later, I went to Okinawa, okay, because I met somebody in Vancouver that told me, come, we have a meeting in Okinawa. So I started, I was in 2001 in Okinawa. And then 3 years later, we worked with National Geographic for Icaria and Costa Rica. So the 2 places were promoted as blue zone.
Okay.
That was the story. And more recently, in 2023, I found that Martinique is the 5th blue zone. Martinique is a French department, and I have, just to take an example, I visited 10 municipalities to check the document. But moreover, I have a list of 2,500 centenarians at home with the name and date of birth.
2,000?
No, not living today.
Oh, not today, but in the past, yes. Yeah, to show that is an area of longevity.
This is for an area that is less than 500,000, and so it's It's quite a lot.
Okay.
It's quite a lot.
So Michel, talk to me about what are the non-negotiable factors that make a blue zone a blue zone?
The non-negotiable, so to be a blue zone, you should have, so when I distributed the centenarian by place of birth, and I may count them, and if you divide their number by the number of newborn, you have exactly the probability to reach 100. What is the probability for a baby there to become centenarian? And so, for example, in Sardinia, it may be 1.5, which means 1.5 out of 100, 1.5% will become centenarian. Why in France, it is less than 1 in metropole. You see? In Martinique, it is 2.200, and in Okinawa, it's even a bit larger. So you need to have this indicator that we name extreme longevity index. An extreme longevity index, this is just the probability to reach 100. It should be at least 50% higher than the average of the country, okay? And it should be also similar to what we saw in Sardinia, that was the reference. Sardinia is the reference, the first one.
The first
and
one,
so
yes.
if you have a proposal for me, I will go and try to collect all the data. It's very important to count how many centenarians by place of birth and to divide by the number of newborn, and I may tell you if it is true that this is an exceptional situation or not.
The term blue zone, do you think that has been diluted by the current wellness craze? So blue zones have talked about longevity, about living longer, and there seems to be an attempt to commercialize blue zones. What do you think about that, Michel?
This is a fully understood. So my good friend, my good friend Dan Büttner, with whom I work for Icaria and Costa Rica, always asked me, Michel, do you have a new blue zone? Because he was interested step by step to have a new blue zone and a new books and so on. But at one moment he decided to create something in the US and put the trademark on blue zone and started to sell this idea of blue zone everywhere in the municipality of the US. And in most of his talk, he say, I discovered the blue zone, So at the beginning, I was not too disturbed, but at the end of the day, when I saw all the money that he did on my shoulder, I decided to cut with him, because for me, I am strictly rigorous and scientist.
Okay.
I never gain any money on the shoulder of the centenarian. While on the other side, he gained million and million, and that has been pointed out in the recent newspaper, because the New York Times Magazine and the Science explained that, in fact, he sold his company to the Adventists. He built a new company, Blue Zone Kitchen. He did a lot of things. Yes. You have everything with Blue Zone. A lot of money is coming. And nothing to do with science. I never received from him any penny, any dollar to support the investigation.
So your research is really about understanding what makes an area have extreme longevity.
Exactly.
Okay.
And therefore, we observe 7 principles that are really the most important that we saw there. So it's eat wisely. This is important. Wisely, it's not too much, not a lot of processed food, and this is very important in your country. Yeah. The processed food is not the best. Vegetable, fruit, done in season, but you have a lot of vegetable in the country, and fruit, I have seen this. So no problem to import, but the most important is to limit the sugar. Okay, so this is all related to food. Then the second one is to exercise, move naturally. Don't forget to move, to do not fitness, but to move. It's very important. In the Blue Zone, people are already moving in the village to say hello and so on. The third one is mostly the contact. You see, have a contact. You have the contact with your family first. Don't forget this. And then the second one is to have the contact with the community. In fact, to live longer and better, you should not forget that you are not alone. You are in a community. And that's something crucial, and I saw it in Singapore. The contacts are really limited. And I'm sure that in Kuala Lumpur, all the big buildings, you have a really difficult contact between all those people living in this building. So we should create a place where it is really easy to meet other person. And then it will be a real support. And what we want to promote is healthy aging, not at individual level, but with other person, supporting a classroom, a club, a group of people living in the same place. So we are also considering the stress that is the most dramatic. You see, you have 3 killers. You have the stress, you have the loneliness, people living alone, and you have the food industry. So if you suppress this, you will live longer. The problem is not to live longer, it's to live longer and happier.
Happier. So that's actually really wonderful, because it's not just about living longer, but it's living meaningfully longer.
Exactly.
And I wanted to ask you about that based on your observations. Should governments strive to make longevity a policy KPI? Should they make, having their citizens live longer, is that something they should be proud of? But how do we talk about meaningfully longer?
In fact, the objective is not that everybody will reach 100. And even I decide not to look anymore on new blue zone, but I switch to another topic that I name living blue zone. Living blue zone, this is how can we implement the lesson of the blue zone within our society.
Right.
Because we observe in the mountain, we observe in Ikaria and so on, rules. How can we apply these in our society? In Kuala Lumpur, for example, how can
it be?
Yeah, and so this is the living blue zone process. It's a process, and it should work progressively, convincing at the community level. How can we improve the quality of life of all people there? And this is for me really very important for the future. So I don't recommend you to go to live in Sardinia. You will not succeed to live there. But in the place where you live, try to do maximum. And that's why we need the support of the authorities, of the local authorities.
Is it possible, Michel, to implement some of the principles of blue zones in modern urban contexts?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Do you need that ecological and cultural isolation that some of the blue zones have?
No, it's really important to think about the possibility, how can we implement these principles in our urban society? So for the food, we should have food that is really natural food. So to develop the garden around the city so that you may import in a lot of fresh fruit, fresh vegetable. This is the first point. And to limit, as they did, for example, in Singapore, they limit the sugar in the drinks.
Yes.
So sugar is really a very bad thing, and obesity is not at the minimum in Malaysia. And so you see, it's a real problem. And we have to start with children.
Okay.
So a lot of things may be non-promoted, just to put an obstacle to a lot of things like that. And favor moving. Is there any place in the city where you can walk or bike and not only the car? This is the problem of the balance between the car and the pedestrian. You have a lot of things. And creating place where people will live together, will meet, will discuss, and involve every citizen in this process, not only the policy maker. Try to discuss with the citizen what are they expecting, what are they willing to do, because without the citizen you will do nothing. So it's the work to be done by the authorities, but also by the local citizen. And I suggest to do it first at a very limited area and progressively to go. But you cannot work at Kuala Lumpur as a whole.
I see.
You have to do, for example, you have 2,000 inhabitants somewhere. Let's try to work together. How can we improve
Have
the
you
situation?
seen it succeed?
It is possible to succeed.
Through government, through engineering of government population policy. Have you seen it succeed?
It has already some positive point in the US, for example.
Oh.
Yes, it's working. But the problem is that in the US, and then I come back to Dan Buettner, that he requested a lot of money to do this, then he turned to business. This is, and in my case, this is public health, which means we have to LS. If I was the Minister of Health in Malaysia, I will really support this idea. And it is not a business, it is just the health and the well-being of the population.
In the 25 years that you have been specifically looking at longevity study, extreme longevity study, have you seen demographic trends change? Have you seen the way people live change?
There are several important changes. In the blue zone, you have some blue zones that are disappearing. Just to take an example, in Okinawa, all the generation born after World War II now suffer from obesity. Why? Because they received the food, the lunchbox, when they were young from the US. It was US occupation, and the food for the children in the school was coming from the US. If you go today in Okinawa, you will see the old person very thin, very small, and very proactive, and then the young people, when I say young, those who are less than 70, that are really problematic. Okinawa, for the below 70, is one of the last prefecture. Why? For the oldest old, it is the first one. So this is something that it seemed very, very important. And then in Costa Rica, the same. When I was there 20 years ago, there were no Burger King, no McDonald's. So if you go today, you will see. And even they prefer to drink a Coke than the natural water or natural juice. This is something really crazy. So some blue zones are really disappearing, and Sardinia is still surviving, and Martinique. Amazing. But there is another topic that concerns Malaysia. This is aging of the population. You see, the population will progressively age because you will have less children, and you live longer. So the health care will be more and more needed because you have more. So this is something you have to consider. This is the demographic transition with more and more old people compared to young ones. So that's something. And the last point I want to say is that for the young people, there are two categories, those who are working and those who are in school. For those who are working, I will not suggest to compete all the time. The competition between them is very bad. So it brings a lot of stress. And for the young one, this is where you have to start to learn how to follow the 7 principles of the Blue Zone. If we start with the children, then their parents will follow, and that will be really positive for the whole country.
Okay, so just now you said if you were the Minister of Health of Malaysia, you would try to implement some policies that align with the 7 principles. Can I ask you what you would prioritize? How would you like to see it being implemented?
Which one? Some are more interesting than others. What
would you prioritize for Malaysia?
It's clear that the sugar revolution is important because I have seen the obesity there. But I am not yet, I will travel a lot in the country during the next day. I will go to Eport, to Cameron Island there and so on. So I will meet outside of Kuala Lumpur because it's important to see how people are living around. Because there is two ways of living, in city or outside. And so I am interested to understand what is happening outside. But in city, it is important to create a situation where people are in contact and they may work together to have a healthy future. That's important, not only the policymaker, but also the citizen at local level.
Yeah, society.
And should be promoted, should be really promoted.
Yeah. Michel, it's been such a joy talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
I hope there will be some change. in Malaysia, and I'm ready to come back to see.
Maybe there's a blue zone here, who knows?
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
You.
That's all the time we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.